It's time to put a collar together. This is a pretty traditional collar. You've got the collar and the collar band. Some of you, for this particular pattern, McCall 6124, you may be just doing a band where it's put on almost, we know it as a mandarin collar, where it's just the band and that's it. We're going to put a collar. In this particular example, we're going to put a collar in it. So here are the two pieces. This is the collar. Let's get a little closer. I've stitched it down the sides. This is right sides together. One side is interfaced and one side is not. So I've stitched it on three sides, the unnotched sides, the sides across the bottom and both sides. And what I'm going to do is trim down these seams. Here's a good practice. You can see this seam. When I'm coming to a corner, I keep going all the way to the edge and I do a back stitch like right in there just to really secure it. And then when I do the cross stitch, I keep going all the way to the edge and I do back stitch right in there just so I have a really secure corner. And the first thing I do is snip right across the point. Let's do it on the other side also. Just snip right across the point. And then I'll trim down. If you think ahead, this is the side, this is the edge that you're going to top stitch. So trim very even, so when you top stitch, your stitch will lay right there, on top of that seam. And depending on your fabric too. I'm using a really lightweight linen. This is a handkerchief linen. And it folds very nicely. And the top stitch will look really pretty. So I'm trimming it down right below a quarter. It's like almost an eighth of an inch. If I were using a heavier fabric, maybe a flannel, I would grade these seams when I trim. I would like trim just one side down. And of course my interfacing would be heavier. And because I've trimmed that corner crosswise, it gives me a really good turn. So, and using a point turner is really helpful. And sometimes I even use a pencil so it's not so pointy. So check this out. Put your finger right there. Put it on the outside before you turn it and press your finger down and turn it and keep your finger right there. And you've got a good point. See, a blunt pencil is not as pointy that will punch through your fabric. Right there. Hold it. And you want to go to the ironing board. If your fabric is fussy, I would go in here, go into this seam and open it and press it. So you can set that seam open and it'll be easy to fold over and press down. But there's nothing like a really nice crisp collar. So this is where it starts. Okay, so we'll go to the ironing board with that. Here's the band. Now the band has a facing, it has an outside and a facing. The outside piece is interfaced. You got your double notches at the top. And the inside piece is called a facing. And what you want to do is pre-fold and press your 5/8 inch seam allowance up. The unnotched edge, because this is how it'll be stitched, sandwiched with the collar. So this is how you prep the band. All right, we got the collar done. It's stitched, flipped, press, and top stitch. Now here's the band. I want to show you a tip here. The pattern pieces have notches only. They also have a center line, center back, center back. That's where the two pattern pieces match up. This is how it looks. Match up in the middle, notches, and this is how they match up. And of course the circles. Unless you transfer these lines to the center on your collar and band, you're gonna lose sight of that. You need that. So here's a tip. Just fold them in half and find the middle and put a pin. Here's your center of the collar and the center on the band that you're gonna sandwich it between. I mean, you can draw a line if you like, but I like doing a pin. So you're gonna do right sides together, line up. You're gonna sandwich the collar in between the two band pieces. Do the center first. Your notches. And then do the ends, and it's going to be right there at the curve. Okay, now sandwich on the band facing. Just make sure you've got an even side here. Here. Here's your notch. Here's your center. The collar is a pretty satisfying piece of the shirt because it's, you know, so precise. So your stitching is going to look like this. You're going to come up, stitch across that curve. Really important to kind of respect that curve. Keep that edge right on your guideline when you're stitching 5/8 seam allowance. And come across and do the same thing on the other side. This is folded up because when you stitch it, and this is where you're going to stitch it onto the shirt, that's going to be already folded. So it just kind of absorbs it, lays down for you, you top stitch, and you're done. So let's get this stitched, and then we'll put the collar on kind of a set. I'll show you how we do that with the pressing ham. The collar and the band is all stitched together, and I've already trimmed it down. A nice, neat trim. So before we put it on the shirt, I'm going to turn it. Make sure you got a nice curve here. Turn it and press it. We're going to set it and put it in its collar shape before it goes on the shirt. So when you put it on the shirt, it'll already be kind of in a nice curve, and the collar will have its bend and all of that. Glad I'm working with this linen because you can finger press before you go to the ironing board. As I turn it, I'm just going to lightly press it. I don't want to mess it up too much. Again, depending on your fabric. I'm working with a handkerchief linen, and it can really get out of whack if I do too much pressing. Let's see the edges. Just make sure they're turned nicely with your corner right there. And this is where you're going to stitch it onto the shirt. But before we do that, we're going to turn the collar back. Here's my hand. I'm put on a small end. I want the collar to shape very nicely and kind of put it underneath and bring it top and put it in its shape. You're gonna need a pin. Pin right there, and then hush iron. And just want the collar to have the roll, not the seam. The seam underneath the collar. You want the collar to have that roll at the top. Not folded on the seam. So look at the collar. There you go. Pen don't want to act right. There we go. Well, I took my break for the collar to set. So, watch that. See? See how it's kind of stays put? Isn't that nice? So, now we're going to put a collar on the back, on the neckband of the shirt. You got a notch here and a notch here, and those notches match the band of the shirt. So you're gonna do right sides together, find your middle. Let's do that again. Let's find that middle point so we can put it on that center seam. You're doing right sides together. You're going to do the center, come around and do those notches, and then do each end. And the ends line right up. There's that folded edge of the band, and here's the stitched edge of the front band. There you go. And it all should line up. And you're going to do your 5/8 inch seam allowance, and you will have a collar on the neckband ready to top stitch down the inside facing and put your white shirt on and go sit in the living room and watch a movie. That's what we've been doing for the past couple of years. Anyway, so here we go. Okay. here's a tip. We're back over to the ironing board. I've stitched the band on, and since you have a nice curve on this collar, you don't want to lay anything out flat again. So get your ham and put yours to press these seams open. You want to press them open and then trim it and press the seam up so you can pull down the facing. But you don't want to disturb all of the curviness that your collar has. So don't lay it out flat on the ironing board. Do your seams a little at a time on the ham, the tip of your iron. All that curvy lusciousness on the collar. I'm going to open it to set it first, and then I'm going to trim it. And after I trim it, I'm going to fold it up underneath the facing. And once I put the facing down, that's where I'm going to top stitch right on the seam. And it's done. It's time for buttons.